A bow tie. Cloud bow tie. Cloud bow tie. Cloud tie. Oh, I know. It's raining. Oh, no, rainbow tie. Rainbow! Yes! And there are plenty more words now in Jackanory Jr.
This is Jackanory Jr. Hello, I'm Adrian. This story is about dragons, good ones and bad ones. It's also about a little boy who wanted to save the world. It's called the Snow Dragon. In the beginning was a world, and it was divided into two halves. The southern half was burning hot and ruled by ferocious fire dragons, but in the cold and icy north lived the peace-loving snow dragons. Where north and south came together, there was a long, narrow land of water and green hills where tall trees and leafy plants grew. And in this land lived the Two Legs. The Two Legs pottered about happily for many years, tending the earth and growing fruit and flowers. And the dragons took no notice of them. But then came a happening that changed everything. At the time of the making of the world, a book was written. A book so special that it was always known simply as Book. Book was a handbook of instructions on how the world worked, and the dragons found it very useful. The happening began when the most royal of fire dragons himself called for Book.
Book,
He rumbled.
tell me if one day I will be lord of all the world, south and north, together.
Book sniggered.
Read and see the future.
And it opened its pages wide.
Behold, the time is coming when fire dragons will be no more.
The fire dragon stared and stared again.
How can this be true?
He snarled.
Who could ever defeat me?
Book turned another page.
A two-leg,
Sneered Book.
The fire dragons will be defeated by a two-leg.
The most royal of fire dragons roared such a terrible blast of flame that the skies turned to burning crimson, and he hurled Book away into the darkness of the swirling smoke and ashes. From that moment on, life became a misery for all Two Legs. The fire dragons hunted them down and blackened their plants and scorched the earth around them. The Two Legs took to living underground in dark caves and dusty, scratched-out tunnels. As time went on, the fire dragons flew further and further north, spreading heat and dryness. The peace-loving snow dragons were driven further and further back, behind huge mountains of snow and ice, until it was thought that there were no snow dragons left alive. But then came a second happening. There were many orphans among the Two Legs. One such orphan was little Tuft. He lived with the very oldest Two Leg, who told him wonderful stories about life as it had been before the happening. Stories of the shining sun and green plants and the rush and splash of the streams and rivers. His favorite story was of the magical snow dragons who loved peace and who never went to war. "Why can't we go and find one?" little Tuft asked. But the oldest Two Leg only smiled and nodded. Little Tuft stopped asking questions, but as soon as he grew tall enough to open the huge wooden door that protected the Two Legs from the world outside, he crept out. He wanted to see for himself what was going on. Outside the caves, Little Tuft stared all around. The earth was charred and burnt and blackened. He took a deep breath and began to walk. Somewhere, there was a way to bring back the magic green land that the oldest two legs told such wonderful stories about. There had to be a way. And he, Little Tuft, was going to find it. Even if... Little Tuft found himself slipping and sliding down a deep, dark chasm. He landed at the bottom.
Excuse me,
Said a rusty, dusty voice.
but would you mind not treading all over me with your grubby little feet?
Little Tuft had found Book. Little Tuft scrabbled and struggled and heaved and hauled himself and Book back up to the sunlight. There he sat down to rest, and Book slyly fluttered his pages open. Little Tuft gasped. "I can see a snow dragon," he whispered, and he rubbed his eyes. "It almost looks as if it's alive."
Ahem,
Said Book.
pay attention. This is the most royal snow dragon asleep in her ice palace.
"But is it true? Is she alive?" asked Little Tuft, breathless in his excitement. "Then we must find her." So Little Tuft set off to find the snow dragon. Book went with him. As they travelled further and further north, they saw fewer and fewer fire dragons until one day they saw none at all. At last they began to trudge across snow and ice, and the air was full of frost and silver flakes. The gates to the ice palace were encrusted with icicles, but Little Tuft was small enough to slide between the bars. The most royal of snow dragons was asleep. Silence hung in the air around her. Little Tuft held his breath and stood still in the doorway.
Well,
Said Book, flapping its pages.
I thought this was what we came all this miserable way to see.
"Shh," Little Tuft whispered. But the snow dragon was stirring. Slowly she stretched herself. Longer and longer and longer she grew. Little Tuft stared at her. He couldn't think of anything to say.
Get on with it.
Hissed Book. The snow dragon turned her head and gazed at them. "Book," she asked, "is it you? And a two-leg?" Little Tuft began to stutter.
Please, I need your help.
The snow dragon stopped, her eyes full of cold tears. "Of all the snow dragons, only I am left. Why should I help you, two-leg? Fight the fire dragons yourself." Little Tuft was blue with cold, but he took a deep breath. "Oh, Your Majesty, you don't understand. The two legs don't want to fight. All they want is a little land where they can live in peace. Look at us. Book will show you." Book stayed firmly closed. Little Tuft's voice began to shake. Perhaps it doesn't know."
Rubbish.
Book strutted forward. "I know everything." It opened its pages wide, and the snow dragon saw the burnt and wasted world. A page turned, and a two-leg baby cried and cried in a dark and murky cavern. Another page, and Little Tuft was struggling across a blackened desert. The snow dragon looked down at Little Tuft. "Yes," she said, and her voice was gentle. "The two legs are very small and weak, but they are still brave enough to walk through fire to ask for help for one another. So, yes, I will help you." The steady beat of the snow dragon's wings lulled Little Tuft into a half sleep. He was certain that now everything would be made right. The most royal of snow dragons would know what to do. Little Tuft shut his eyes and leant back against the mighty silver wing. "Book," he said happily. It'll soon be a happy ever after ending. Book made a snarling noise. It began to open and close its covers angrily. Book? Little Tuft sat up. What are you doing?
I'm going to change the ending, that's what.
And Book leapt off the snow dragon's back and half flew, half floated into the grey clouds below. Oh, oh! Little Tuft cried out, "Oh, snow dragon, what will happen?" The snow dragon heaved a deep and painful sigh. "The fire dragons will know that we are coming." Little Tuft hung on tightly to the snow dragon's scaly neck. "But can we still save the world?" "Look, Little Tuft," said the snow dragon. A huge volcano was belching red and yellow flames high into the sky, and fire dragons soared in and out of the glittering sparks that showered from its glowing crater. Clouds of thick black smoke swirled into words. "Most royal of fire dragons, king of all the world." "Book has arrived," said the snow dragon. Little Tuft began to cry. "What can we do?" he sobbed. The snow dragon did not answer. She began to circle, and with a scraping of scales against the rocks, landed on a bare mountain. "Little Tuft," she said, "I must leave you here." "No," said Little Tuft. "Please, most wonderful snow dragon, please don't go home. I didn't mean to cry, but we just can't give up, please." The snow dragon picked Little Tuft off her back and dropped him gently on the ground. She kissed him with a cold, icy kiss, and flew up and away. Little Tuft stood and watched as she circled once above him, and then his eyes opened wide. The snow dragon was not flying back to the north. She was flying directly towards the volcano. She came hurtling down into the very heart of the fire. As she dived, the fire and smoke changed to hissing fountains of boiling steam that shot high into the air and cooled into weird and wonderful spikes and turrets and pinnacles of ice. Fire dragons raged and roared and rampaged in the smoke and the steam, but one by one, they melted away into cinders that glowed for one last moment, and then went out. Then came the snow. Little Tuft shivered and huddled under the rocks for shelter. He went on watching for the snow dragon until he was frozen with cold, but she never came back. Then, one morning, the sun came leaping up into the sky, and the snow began to melt. Beneath the snow, the earth was green, and the sky above was brilliant blue. Two legs came creeping and scrambling out into the light. They held up their arms to the sun, and they shouted and laughed and cried with joy. Little Tuft began to jump down the rocks, but halfway he suddenly stopped. There were snow-white clouds along the horizon, and for a second, he thought he'd caught a glimpse of the snow dragon lying in among them. Little Tuft rubbed his eyes. Was it really the snow dragon or a cloud? He shook his head. He would never know for certain. But he waved, just in case. Then he ran on to join the other two legs, to be hugged and kissed and to argue about who should be the first to dig the earth and sow the seeds. And Book?
Betrayal and I are doing a spot of meditation. It gives us a chance to calm down, relax, and prepare ourselves for the bedtime hour. It's great for the mind. In fact, I can use my mind to switch off the lights in the garage. Close the screens and power down.
Bedtime!
They're back! One boy and his dog.
Being a superhero is great fun, isn't it, Daniel? here?
Looking for something, Tommy Zoom.
My kids! We've got to stop them.
I love this bit.
Only one person can save us now.
The one and only
Tommy Zoom!
I'm Tommy Zoom.
Respect.
Brand new Tommy Zoom. Saving the planet. Weekdays at 4:30 on CBeebies.
Look what's happening, Chris. The sun's going down.
Goodbye, sun. Now that the day is done, it's gonna be nighttime soon. Goodbye, sun. We'll have more fun tomorrow. Now it's time to say hello, moon. Goodbye, sun. Hello, moon.
Look, a penguin, which begins with a P, the letter P, which is also for poi. Yes, I chose that letter today for the travel challenge. Did you choose a letter for your travel challenge? Good. Well, it is the bedtime hour, and I'm going to put my hand in the twinkly, twinkling sky and see what I can find. Here goes. It's incredible what you can find in the night sky. A little bit of